I'm Lorne Greene, and if there's one thing I really believe in...
Ever since we were together on Bonanza, he's been like a real son to me.
For 14 incredible years, Bonanza ruled American television screens, a show that shaped an entire generation and turned Lorne Greene into a household name. As the patriarch Ben Cartwright, Greene embodied strength, wisdom, and integrity. He wasn't just the head of the Cartwright family, he was the heart of Bonanza. But behind the cameras, a quiet storm was brewing, one that would ultimately drive Greene to make a decision no one saw coming. By the early 1970s, Bonanza had become more than just a Western. It was a cultural phenomenon. Millions tuned in every week, drawn to the Cartwright family's adventures on the Ponderosa Ranch. Fans believed the cast was as close in real life as they were on screen. But when tragedy struck and tensions began to rise among the cast and producers, the foundation of that beloved family began to crack. Lorne Greene, known for his professionalism and calm demeanor, suddenly found himself in a situation that tested everything he stood for. After years of carrying the show's emotional weight and watching it slowly change into something unrecognizable, Greene reached his breaking point. Then, one day, something happened on set that changed everything. Those who were there said you could feel the shift in the air, a single moment that shattered the illusion of Bonanza's unity. And within days, Greene made a stunning announcement that left both his co-stars and fans speechless. He was done. But what could have possibly pushed the man who was Ben Cartwright to walk away from the show that defined his life? What really happened behind the scenes of Bonanza? The truth, as you'll soon see, is far more emotional than anyone ever realized. Before the conflict, before the heartbreak, there was Bonanza, a show that changed television forever. When it first aired in 1959, Westerns were already a hit genre, but Bonanza was different. It wasn't just about gunfights or cattle drives, it was about family, morality, and the complicated choices that came with life on the frontier. And at the center of it all stood Lorne Greene, a Canadian actor with a commanding presence and a voice that sounded like it came straight from Mount Olympus. Greene played Ben Cartwright, the wise and compassionate father who raised his 3 sons, Adam, Hoss, and little Joe, on the sprawling Ponderosa Ranch. Each son had a different mother, but Ben's love for them was unwavering. That dynamic gave the show something audiences had never seen before: emotional depth. People didn't just watch Bonanza for the shootouts. They watched it for the lessons, the laughter, and the heart. Lorne Greene became synonymous with Ben Cartwright. He wasn't just acting, he was living that role. Off-screen, his castmates often described him as a real-life father figure, offering advice and stability on set. Michael Landon, who played Little Joe, once said that Greene was the glue that held everyone together. His wisdom, calm demeanor, and natural authority made him the anchor of the entire production. But as the years went on, the energy on the Ponderosa began to shift. Michael Landon was becoming more ambitious behind the camera, eager to write and direct. Pernell Roberts, who played Adam, had already expressed frustration with his character's lack of depth and had walked away from the show in 1965. Dan Blocker, who played the lovable Hoss, remained loyal but grew increasingly tired from the long shooting hours. Through all of it, Greene stayed steady and a professional through and through. He was proud of what Bonanza represented and how it touched millions of viewers. Yet, by the early 1970s, even he could sense that the magic that once defined the series was beginning to fade. Television was changing. Audiences were shifting toward grittier, more modern stories. Ratings began to dip, and NBC started making decisions that prioritized commercial interests over storytelling. For a man like Greene, who valued integrity above everything, that was difficult to watch. And then came the blow that no one, not even the stoic Lorne Greene, could have prepared for. In 1972, tragedy struck the Bonanza family when Dan Blocker suddenly passed away due to complications from surgery. The loss was devastating. To Lorne Greene, Dan wasn't just a co-star, he was like a son. Greene had spent more than a decade acting alongside him, sharing countless hours on set and off. His death tore a hole in Greene's heart, and something inside him changed forever. When production resumed, the mood on set was no longer the same. Greene tried his best to carry on, to keep the Cartwright family alive for the fans, but the Ponderosa felt empty without Hoss. Michael Landon struggled to find joy in filming, and the chemistry that once made Bonanza so magical was gone. Lorne Greene began questioning whether continuing the show was the right thing to do. Without Dan Blocker, he wondered if Bonanza still had its soul. Yet, being the professional he was, he stayed for one more season. But his heart wasn't in it. What happened next would push him over the edge completely. Something occurred behind the scenes that not only disrespected the legacy of Bonanza, but also the memory of Dan Blocker himself. And when it did, Lorne Greene, the man who embodied strength and loyalty, decided he'd had enough. After Dan Blocker's death, Bonanza was never the same. The cast tried to carry on, and NBC insisted the show must go on, but the spirit of the Ponderosa had faded. The once vibrant energy on set had turned into quiet exhaustion. For Lorne Greene, every day on set became a painful reminder of the family they had lost. When the network announced plans to continue Bonanza without Dan, Greene had serious reservations. He knew how much fans loved Hoss Cartwright, the big-hearted, gentle soul who represented kindness and humor on the show. To him, removing Hoss felt like tearing out the heart of Bonanza. But NBC executives were determined. They believed the show could survive, even thrive, without him. Greene disagreed, and that's where the tension began. Things escalated when producers introduced a new character to fill the void left by Hoss. The idea was to bring in younger, fresher faces to appeal to a new generation of viewers. But Greene saw it as an insult, not just to Dan Blocker's legacy, but to the years of work the original cast had built together. He quietly voiced his frustration to the writers, saying that Bonanza was never meant to be about replacing people. It was about family, loss, and endurance. Then came the breaking point. During one of the early production meetings for the show's 14th season, NBC executives reportedly discussed a storyline that would completely ignore Hoss's death. They wanted to avoid sadness and keep things light. To Lorne Greene, that was unthinkable. The idea of pretending Hoss never existed went against everything the show stood for: truth, morality, and human connection. Greene walked out of that meeting in silence. But those who knew him said he was furious, not in a loud, explosive way, but in a quiet, deeply personal one. He had built Bonanza on integrity, and now the network wanted to rewrite that history for ratings. In one interview years later, a crew member recalled seeing Greene sitting alone on the Ponderosa set after that meeting, staring at the empty space where Hoss's horse once stood. He said nothing for a long time, and then simply said, "It's not the same anymore." Greene continued filming for a short while, but his enthusiasm was gone. The scripts felt hollow, the stories lacked purpose, and the set felt like a shadow of what it once was. Michael Landon, who had become increasingly frustrated with the creative direction, also shared Greene's feelings. Both men were loyal to the show, but not at the cost of its soul. When NBC began pushing for more commercial changes, including altering Ben Cartwright's character to make him more modern, Greene drew a line. To him, Ben Cartwright wasn't just a TV role. He was a symbol of honesty, wisdom, and fatherhood. Diluting that character for ratings felt like a betrayal. Then, in one final disagreement, Greene reportedly told the producers, "You can take the Cartwright name off the Ponderosa, but don't expect me to stand there and pretend this is the same show." That was the moment everyone knew it was over. Greene decided he couldn't go on any longer. He announced his departure quietly, without anger or publicity, just a deep sense of loss. Within months, Bonanza was officially canceled. The man who had carried the show for over a decade had finally let it go. And though his departure marked the end of an era, it also preserved Bonanza's dignity. But what happened to Lorne Greene after he left the show? How did he cope with losing not just a beloved series, but the family he built through it? The next chapter of his life would surprise everyone, filled with grief, reinvention, and one final triumph that proved the spirit of Ben Cartwright never truly died. When Bonanza finally ended, Lorne Greene felt both relief and heartbreak. For more than a decade, he had dedicated his life to the Ponderosa, to the Cartwrights, and to the millions of fans who saw him as the perfect father figure. But walking away also meant leaving behind a part of himself. The ranch, the crew, the scripts, they had been his second home. And now, suddenly, it was gone. The months following the show's end were especially difficult for Greene. He missed the long shooting days, the laughter between takes, and even the challenges that came with running such a massive production. More than anything, he missed Dan Blocker. The two had formed a genuine friendship that extended beyond Hollywood, and losing him had left a hole that could never be filled. But Greene was not the kind of man to fade quietly into the background. While many assumed his career would end with Bonanza, he surprised everyone by returning to the screen with renewed purpose. In 1973, he starred in the short-lived series Griff, where he played a former police officer turned private investigator. Although it didn't reach Bonanza's success, it showed that Greene was still capable of carrying a show on his shoulders. He also began hosting and narrating documentaries, where his deep, commanding voice found new life. Audiences still trusted him. They still saw him as a voice of wisdom and authority. Whether he was talking about nature, history, or the human spirit, Greene's delivery carried the same warmth that once filled the living rooms of Bonanza's fans. In the late 1970s, Greene returned to the Western genre, but this time with a different tone. He starred in Battlestar Galactica, 1978-1979, a science fiction series where he played Commander Adama. The show became a cult classic, and once again, Greene found himself leading a family, this time among the stars. It was poetic in a way. Ben Cartwright had become Commander Adama, still guiding his people, still offering wisdom, only now in outer space instead of the Old West. Despite his continued success, Greene's personal life was marked by quiet sadness. He often spoke in interviews about the loneliness of fame and how difficult it was to maintain a sense of normalcy after so many years in the spotlight. He once said, "You can play the greatest father on television, but when the cameras stop, you realize how much you miss the family that role gave you." Greene also became an advocate for environmental causes, lending his voice to animal welfare campaigns and conservation projects. His deep connection to nature, something he had always expressed through Bonanza, continued to guide him. Fans admired not only his talent but also his compassion, yet even as he continued working, age began to catch up with him. By the 1980s, Greene slowed down considerably, choosing fewer projects and spending more time at home with his wife, Nancy Deal. The two shared a quiet, loving relationship, and she became his pillar of strength during his later years. For many fans, it was bittersweet to see him grow older. The once vibrant, strong Ben Cartwright now walked more slowly, spoke more softly, but the spark in his eyes never faded. He carried himself with the same dignity that had made him one of television's most respected figures. Lorne Greene knew his time in the spotlight was ending, but he never viewed it with regret. He had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that few could match. Still, one final chapter remained, one filled with heartbreak, reflection, and a moment that would remind everyone why the world loved him so deeply. By the late 1980s, Lorne Greene had become a living legend. To millions, he wasn't just Ben Cartwright or Commander Adama. He was a symbol of strength, wisdom, and decency. Yet behind that larger-than-life image was a man quietly preparing for his final curtain call. In his later years, Greene remained active but increasingly selective about his work. He continued to lend his deep, reassuring voice to documentaries, commercials, and charity projects. He often said that storytelling was the thread that binds humanity, and he wanted to keep using his gift to make a difference. But those closest to him noticed a growing fragility. Decades of long filming schedules and emotional strain had taken their toll. Greene's health began to decline in the mid-1980s. Though he rarely spoke about it publicly, he faced a series of medical challenges that forced him to slow down. True to his nature, he never complained. He continued to smile for fans, attend charity events, and speak with warmth whenever asked about Bonanza. "It was more than a show," he once said softly in an interview. "It was a family, and it will always be a part of me." In 1987, Greene underwent surgery for complications related to an ulcer. Though the operation initially seemed successful, his condition worsened. On September 11, 1987, the world received heartbreaking news. Lorne Greene had passed away at the age of 72. His death left Hollywood and generations of viewers in mourning. Michael Landon, who had long viewed Greene as a mentor and father figure, was devastated. He called Greene the best man I ever knew. Fans from around the world sent letters, flowers, and tributes. For many, it felt as though they had lost their own father. In the days that followed, reruns of Bonanza aired across networks, and people once again found themselves drawn to the warmth and moral clarity of Ben Cartwright. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was comfort. Greene's character represented a kind of goodness that felt timeless. Lorne Greene's funeral was a simple, dignified affair, just the way he would have wanted. Friends, family, and former castmates gathered not only to mourn his passing, but to celebrate a life well lived. Michael Landon, visibly emotional, spoke briefly, saying, "He taught us what it meant to be a man, not by what he said, but by how he lived." Though Greene was gone, his influence never faded. His work on Bonanza became a cornerstone of television history, and generations who discovered the show through reruns came to love him just as deeply as those who watched it live. His calm, authoritative voice continued to be featured in documentaries for years after his passing, reminding everyone of his enduring presence. Even today, decades later, fans still visit the Bonanza filming locations in Nevada, leaving notes and flowers in his honor. They talk about how his portrayal of Ben Cartwright helped shape their view of family, honor, and strength. To them, Lorne Greene wasn't just an actor. He was a moral compass in a changing world. Before his death, Greene was once asked what he hoped people would remember about him. He paused, smiled, and said that I tried to do some good, that I left something worth remembering. He did far more than that. Lorne Greene left behind a legacy that continues to inspire decades after his final bow. His voice, his values, and his presence live on, not just in the dusty trails of the Ponderosa, but in the hearts of everyone who still hears the opening theme of Bonanza and feels, for a moment, that the Cartwrights are still right there with them.